to the France 24 debate. So, is he dead or not? A senior French military official has said one of Al-Qaeda's senior field commanders in the Sahara, Abdelhamid Abu Zaid, has probably been killed in Mali. The Chadian army, fighting alongside French forces, has claimed it killed Abu Zaid and fellow militant Mokhtar Belmokhtar in a recent round of clashes. However, until a body's been found, Abu Zaid's death cannot be confirmed. Now, Western and regional nations are worried that Al-Qaeda will use the zone as a launchpad for international attacks. They also fear it may strengthen ties with homegrown Islamist groups such as Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Boko Haram in Nigeria. But if both Abu Zaid and Belmokhtar have indeed been killed, what does it mean for the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb? Is it the beginning of the end for the jihadist group? And for the Hollande government, what does it mean for those 15 French hostages believed to be held by Al-Qaeda operatives in the region? Joining me to discuss this is William Jordan, the former Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy of Algiers, and Richard Young, a French socialist senator who's been working closely with the Malian community here in France while monitoring the French military operation. Dougoukolo Konare, who's from Mali and currently a researcher at Paris Descartes, and from London, Omar Ashour, a specialist in Middle East studies at the University of Exeter. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. But before we start talking, I'd like to take a look at this report by Katavan Gorgistani.
Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb is likely to have lost one of its most senior commanders. Mauritanian news website Sahara Media confirmed Abdelhamid Abu Zaid's death, but French authorities are less adamant.
It's likely, but only likely. We can't be sure right now. It would be very good news, but we haven't recovered the body yet.
Abu Zaid is believed to have killed British hostage Edwin Dyer in 2009 and Frenchman Michel Germano in 2010. While his killing would be a serious blow to Al-Qaeda's North African branch, it also raises questions about the fate of the 7 French hostages thought to be held in northern Mali. Their families are worried the 7-week-long campaign led by French troops may put them further at risk. In an official statement, they've asked France to negotiate with the terrorist group.
It's time to find out where the hostages are and not put their lives at risk. That's our message. We have to stop military operations. The president, the commander-in-chief, is the only one who can make this decision.
Last week, the Chadian army announced they had also killed another Al-Qaeda commander. Mokhtar Belmokhtar is said to be responsible for January's mass hostage-taking in an Algerian gas plant. Sahara Media denies the death, saying he is very much alive.
That was Katavan Gorgistani with that report. First of all, I'd like to ask William Jordan, we're not sure, obviously, if Abu Zaid is dead. So how actually can we confirm if indeed that's the case?
Well, I agree with Matthew Guidère and others who have said that it'll come from AQIM itself, the jihadist sort of circle of websites and officials will confirm or deny the deaths of these individuals. It's important to note that martyrdom is part of the mythology that these leaders have around them, and so they have no interest actually in hiding or pretending not to that their members not have been killed. In fact, they can gain quite a bit in terms of their propaganda if they publicize it, if in fact it's happened.
Well, is it surprising that we haven't heard from them at this point?
If it continues more than a couple more days, I would say that yes, it's unusual. But generally, I've found that there's a lag, especially with AQIM. I mean, when I was in Algeria, battlefield commanders would be killed or reportedly killed, and it would take a while, often a week or more, for AQIM to actually confirm. And they generally do that, as I said, in a very flowery sort of propagandistic way to try to eulogize the person who's been killed.
Omar Ashour in London, I just want to bring you in at this point. What sort of man is Abu Zaid? If indeed he is dead, is this a major blow for the organisation?
I think if it's true, it will be a blow. It's less of a blow, though, compared to Mokhtar Belmokhtar. We're talking in case of Mukhtar bil-Mukhtar, that's a man who has around 22 years of experience in armed conflicts, from Afghanistan to the conflict in Algeria to the situation currently in Mali. In addition, also, he's a mix of a successful organizational commander, a bit of an ideologue, and with some connections to even Al-Qaeda Central, Al-Qaeda outside of the Sahel region, and one of the few commanders who acted autonomously from Akim, from Al-Qaeda's command in northern Algeria. So he will be a major blow. And if you looked at the amount of operations his brigade conducted, his brigade is one of 4 brigades that operate in the south, in the so-called Sahara Emirate. He has slightly more than 50% of the attacks from 2003, his brigade was behind. On the other hand, Abu Zaid is also an influential commander, but not at the same level of Bil-Mukhtar. His brigade, Tariq ibn Ziyad brigade, also is quite an active one, as the report mentioned, conducted quite a few hostage-taking operations, and including targeting French citizens. But at the same time, it does not have the same level of experience or even the same level of resources compared to Mukhtar bil-Mukhtar.
Thanks for that, Omar. Richard, Omar was just explaining there about how it could be indeed a blow for the organisation. What do you think?
Yes, I share the view. Of course, I can offer no comment on the killing. It will come from them. It will come from finding the bodies. But clearly, the two men are different. Ben-Mokhtar was both, you could say, a businessman. He did a lot of money through tobacco and drug business. This could finance his movement. But on the other hand, he was very much followed by his men. He was very charismatic. And the fact, if he is killed, it will be a very serious blow to his group, to his Katiba. For Abu Zaid, things are different. He was more, I would say, on the ideological side of things, perhaps more.
He was definitely more of an ideologue, wasn't he, than Bel-Mokhtar?
Yes, and probably Abu Zaid was more in contact with other groups throughout the world, while Ben-Mokhtar had separated from the main terrorist group of ACME and was leading his own life, if I may say so.
William, you...
I just want to add one historical point, and that is, this is not the first time that this part of AQIM, I mean, it was once known as GSPC, has suffered a leadership catastrophe of this sort. I mean, in 2004, Abdurrazak al-Para, the notional leader of that area, was captured by Chad. You had a decapitation. You had sort of a messed up situation that Al-Qaeda had to scramble to recover from. Mukhtar bil-Mukhtar entered into a period of considerable competition with people sent down from northern Algeria. And now, with the situation in that area involving the French and these other African forces, that is probably going to be the most complicating factor for AQIM to reassemble. And the future, in terms of whether or not Mali can truly reestablish central government control and there's more of a secure environment in which to operate, that will determine whether or not AQIM recovers as much as the loss of these leaders.
I believe that beyond individuals in this situation, we have to take a strong look at the people on the field, and everyday citizen, everyday people in Mali.
What sort of level of support did these men have among the local population?
I think that it's very difficult to actually assess their support with the population. But one thing seems certain, though, it's the rise of a sentiment of global war, in a way, led by Western nations against Islam. And I think that whether Abu Zaid is dead or not, something has really touched the core of this country, of Mali. And this has been happening for years. So I think that on the one hand, Of course, there's the whole security, the management of the whole security mess, but as well, we need to cater to the minds of the people and to listen to them, and we need to hear more often our religious leaders come forth and say there's a difference between what those people are preaching and what we really want for our country as a united country with peaceful people.
Omar, I just want to ask you that question about the level of support that Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb has in that part of Mali. I mean, what sort of support do they have, and what sort of organisation are they? I mean, how different are they from other Al-Qaeda franchises?
Okay, this is a very complex subject. It's very difficult as well to assess the level of support on the ground. But what you definitely had is that Al-Qaeda was lost any kind of legitimacy in Algeria. You had if we went a little bit back in the history, you had a coup in 1992 ending what you can call the Algerian Spring and developing into a situation of a civil war, an armed conflict, where one of the main organizations that led the conflict was the GIA. And out of the GIA came the GSPC in 1998, mainly to condemn the GIA's actions and targeting everybody from whether army or civilians or tourists or whatever, and focusing the fight against the army. And then after that, there was a lack of capacity among the GSPC, and by 2007, a breakaway from the GSPC, because the others reconciled with the regime, became AQIM. And again, mainly for logistical and resources reasons, they were pushed into the Sahara, pushed across the borders, and found a very lucrative trade there, a mix of smuggling, contraband, hostage-taking, but also a very wide governless region. But one thing they really learned from the mother organization, from the GIA, was that they need to embed themselves in the local population. They cannot fight with the locals. They cannot tax them. They cannot slaughter them. They need to find a strategy of embeddedness. And that was also a lesson learned from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which you found the locals rebelling against it in 2007, what's the so-called Sahwat. In Iraq, I mean.
Certainly.
So what they did really is they started to marry into local population. Mukhtar al-Mukhtar has 4 wives, you know, some of them were from the prominent tribal figures in Tawariq area in north of Mali. But also taking up the causes of the locals. So the secession cause, the autonomy cause of many of the tribal leaders and figures in north of Mali. AQIM took it and supported it, and part of the logistics that they had was put in that direction or allocated to the autonomy. So you see this kind of embeddedness, plus the religious symbolism in the rhetoric. All of that gave them some kind of alliances with the locals, with the local movement, especially when part of the Azawad liberation movement, the Ansar-ud-Din, became also in alliance with them. One thing, though, about these alliances is they don't last long because alliances of convenience, and in times of crisis, they usually break away. And if the report about Bouzaid is correct, it's probably some of the defectors from Ansar-ud-Din who informed about his location. And this is just an indication that these alliances, the embeddedness thing, is not usually work under crisis situations.
Now, Omar was just talking there about the fact that they've been very successful, William, in sort of making themselves part or integrating with the local population and marrying the locals as such, which means that this is not going to be a short-term military operation by any stretch if you've got that some degree of embeddedness, as Omar just described it.
I agree. I mean, although I go back to the earlier comments that we don't really have a good handle on the local attitudes. I mean, this has been one of the most difficult challenges for policymakers in Washington, Paris, and elsewhere, trying to figure out how to deal with this problem as outsiders in helping, particularly the government of Mali, establish some sort of reasonable establishment of state control in these little governed spaces. I you know, the real question right now, as I see it, is the degree to which the military campaign being carried out by France and its African allies succeeds in decapitating the leadership in a meaningful way, not simply taking care of one or two leaders, but really taking care of everybody who can even fill in for the leaders. And secondly, destroying the infrastructure that supports whatever activities the jihadists have been taking part in. If there is an ongoing security environment in which there is no way that AQIM can infiltrate additional leaders into the area and prevent supplies from coming down from the north, from Algeria, into the area, then I think you have a breathing space in which to create a more sustainable security environment. But again, that gets back to the whole vexing issue of the political dynamics in Mali.
Definitely. I believe that there's an emptiness in a way that has been filled over the years by all these groups, sort of political emptiness, a lack of willingness from the politics to...
It's avoid as such.
Yes, I think that on the one hand, many politicians have made deals with religious figures and authorities in order to gain more support from the certain weak classes of the society, thinking that this is going to earn them a right to rule the country. So because of that, they have let religious organizations from different parts of the world to come to Mali to invest in regions where people are very poor. So those people, they see a government that isn't very strong, and then they see those organizations that can cater to their needs, and the choice can seem very simple for them. That's one aspect. The other one, I think, is that for many of the people involved in the conflict right now, there really doesn't seem to be an end game, a vision of what is going to happen in the end. Is this a question of partition? Is this a question of becoming a theocracy? Is this a question of going back to democracy? I feel like no one is really talking to all these people. There is a clear lack of leadership, and that is easily seen in the situation of the Malian army, the situation of the Malian justice, and the situation of the Malian political class.
Dougoukolo, there's some excellent points you've just made there, but I'm afraid we have to take a short break. But just pause for a moment, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
It may be an energy source for the future, but the hopes that solar power will also become a money spinner have taken a hit. In Europe, the blame's been put on unfair competition from China. But is the explanation that simple?
Don't miss Beyond Business, Saturday 10:15 a.m. Paris time on France 24.